Welcome to the Drum Shuffle, a podcast offering insights, perspectives, and conversations for drummers. I'm your host, Jamie Eads. Hey everybody, welcome to the Drum Shuffle. This is episode 28. Jamie Eads joining you as always. Hope everybody's having a fantastic week out there. Hope your drumming is coming along great. We have a fantastic episode for you today. We are going to be joined by one of the most prolific session drummers of the past 20 years, in my opinion. The great Matt Chamberlain will be by in just a moment, so please stay tuned. Los Cabos drumsticks may be the best kept secret from drummers today. Los Cabos drumsticks makes the finest tools to touch a drummer's hands in the business. The best news, almost every popular stick size is available in both white hickory and red hickory. If you don't know what red hickory is, it's made from the heartwood of the hickory tree, unlike regular white hickory, which is made from sapwood. Red hickory drumsticks will hold up to even the hardest hitting drummers. Their durability comes from the density of the wood, but they do not sacrifice the feel. Please visit LosCabosDrumsticks.com to learn more about their products. And don't forget to ask at your favorite retailer for Los Cabos drumsticks. All right, guys, we are super excited today because we are going to be joined by quite possibly one of the most prolific recording drummers of the past 20 years, the great Matt Chamberlain, of course. Here is just a short list of artists that he has either toured or recorded with. David Bowie, Fiona Apple, Neko Case, Soundgarden, Bill Frisell, Tori Amos, Morrissey, George Clinton, Elvis Costello, Pearl Jam, Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians, Kanye West, Bruce Springsteen, the Wallflowers, A Perfect Circle, Willie Nelson, Elton John, Randy Newman, Miranda Lambert, Keith Urban, Stevie Nicks, Sheryl Crow. So if you can't tell by that list of credits that this guy is playing at the top of his game and at the top of the recording industry, we were just so excited to get Matt booked on the show. Such a nice guy. He has a lot of great information to share with us. So please help me welcome the great Matt Chamberlain to the Drum Shuffle. Hey, good afternoon, Matt. How's it going?
Going great.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for taking the time and coming on the Drum Shuffle. We certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for asking me.
For sure. Matt, it goes without saying. I mean, I think all drummers and probably most musicians know who you are and kind of how you came up. So I'm not going to bore everybody, going back to your childhood and all that stuff. But you've just been so prolific over the years. You've played with pretty much everybody on earth, I think. I've been looking through your website, doing some research for our interview today, and you've got just a ton of stuff coming out even this year. So are you doing, a session pretty much every day these days?
No, not really. I mean, it goes in waves, like most studio work goes. You'll for some reason everybody wants to record at the same time, so you'll be working for 2 or 3 weeks straight, and then all of a sudden nobody's working, and then like a month later everybody wants to record the same week. so it kind of goes in waves, but and then a lot of stuff. It might be coming out at the same time other records that I've done are coming out, but maybe I did that session like 2 years ago. A lot of people take a little time to finish up their records. So it's just all kind of it all depends. But generally I'm not working every single day on other people's stuff. I am coming to my studio if I'm home and practicing and writing and doing my own music if I can, and cleaning the toilet and vacuuming the floors.
Well, I mean, I didn't know you cleaned the toilet and vacuumed the floors out at Cyclops Sound Studio, but,
somebody has to. Somebody has to.
Well, for sure.
It's that old saying of like, you don't own a recording studio. The recording studio owns you. So I'm merely a slave to my studio. Whenever it needs something done, I do it. But yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a fantastic facility. And, I'm kind of curious to know, do you allow other artists come in and rent the studio out to do stuff? Or is it kind of Matt Chamberlain home base and it's only for you?
That's usually what it is. It's usually my space for, projects I'm involved with. But I do have some good friends that I trust to, I've had people come in and do vocal overdubs or horns or just, random stuff. But I just have so many personal items in here. It would just be hard for me to allow a band in and a bunch of, because who knows, somebody might walk away with something.
Yeah.
I have a lot of things in here. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, that does happen. We would hope that it wouldn't, but it does happen occasionally. And, to that point, if anybody has ever seen any of your videos, of you tracking in your space, I told you I was going to ask you about this. There is, this, I guess it's kind of a rolling cart. It looks like a big shelf, but it literally has one of the nicest collections of snare drums housed in it that I've ever seen. How long have you been collecting? And has that collection been because you record, or were you just a drum junkie and you have them?
A lot of it is because I record. I keep thinking that if I wasn't making records as a hired session musician, I probably wouldn't have all those snare drums because there's no need for that many drums. But, over time I have enjoyed finding the cool, weird snare drum in some shop somewhere or on eBay, the evil eBay, and just finding stuff to use that sounds a little bit odd, because a lot of times when I'm recording with people, they don't necessarily want the hi-fi full fidelity drum sounds. A lot of times they just want janky shit, stuff that's like rattly and just kind of wrong sounding. So I try to have a lot of that kind of stuff around, and a lot of a lot of the drums are just tuned in a certain way, so I can work fast. Like some drums are just tuned very low and dead, and in that 70s kind of fat thing, and then some of the snares are tuned in more modern rock kind of open thing. So basically I have them all there, and I can just grab them kind of knowing what they're going to do before I even tune them, because they're all pre-set up, I guess you'd say. They're all tweaked to do a certain thing. And so I can grab it and go, okay, you're looking for this kind of sound, so let's start with this drum, and if that's not the drum, let's grab this other drum. Or if you want to go completely bonkers, I have this other thing. So it helps with recording. But if I was playing live all the time on the road, you really just need a couple snares. Just a backup snare. Just if something breaks, or maybe if you have like a song you have to do where there's like a particular snare drum sound you got to get on the song. But for recording, it's good to have a lot of options. That's what I think. Sure. Well, don't tell my wife that you only need 2 snare drums if you're playing live primarily. Hopefully she's not listening to this today. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, I guess it depends what kind of live you're doing. I mean, if you're doing a lot of different types of music live, you might need a lot of snare drums.
Well, okay,
if you're doing like a bebop gig or and then you do like a soul gig, and then you do like a rock gig, you're going to need some snare drums.
Yeah, well, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, brother.
And plus, snare drums are just cool. They're a little. It's not like buying a whole kit. You can just buy the drum. And
right.
Go, look at this thing. This thing is awesome. I love this drum, and it does this. And
yeah, exactly.
It's not taking up your whole room. You can just stick it in the corner.
Right. Well, I mean, I've walked into some gigs and the guitarist, needs a U-Haul to bring all of his guitars in that he's going to use tonight. Why can't I have, 7 snare drums, right? I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, it's, I feel like I owe it to myself to buy another snare drum next week. So, so that's kind of how I roll over here anyway. Well,
And it is, all joking aside, it is important to have all those sounds, especially now, because I'm finding that when you are recording with people, a lot of times they come in with these demos that are incredible sounding. They just sound amazing, and maybe they're attached to the snare drum sound on the demo, and you got to try to get it, and you just never know what they're going to want to go for, so... I mean, that's the excuse I give my wife. I need a lot of snare drums to cover a lot of different situations here. Maybe it's and plus it's just interesting to tune up just like a basic Ludwig Superphonic and just hear what it does naturally, as opposed to like a chrome over brass drum or a Radio King, or like a Traviata, like a solid shell drum, or a brass drum. There's so many different materials and ways of tuning them and qualities of sound. It's just cool to learn about it. I'm a geek like that too. I'm just always curious, like, well, what does that drum do? I noticed that guy's playing that drum. How come? And obviously the drummer is making it sound the way it does, but there's certain qualities to drums that are just inherent in the way it's made and the materials and stuff. So it's just good to become familiar with it if you're doing a lot of recording, just so you can go, oh yeah, I hear on your demo that sounds like a Superphonic, or it sounds like a Black Beauty, or
right.
Some weird drum with lots of tape on it, detuned. So it's just cool to learn all that, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, that's a good point. And, it kind of in that same vein, you're known and you've done a lot of work for the fine folks over at Loop Loft. I think there's a couple of collections now that you've done for them. And, it runs the gamut from, like you said, bebop sounding kits, or the big Bonham sounding kits and all that stuff. And I'm assuming that you used a lot of your collection on that. I'm guessing a lot of that stuff wasn't just backlined in when you did all of those loops, right?
Yeah, it's just stuff I have lying around. I'm a fan. I think besides being a fan of music, I might even equally be as much of a fan of drum sounds as I am. Because whenever I hear something, a lot of times I'll get seduced by the drum sound, even if the music's not that great. And I'll just listen to it over and over again, just thinking, this sounds incredible. What is going on with these drums? Like, what is this? And, or this is, there's just drum sounds that are magical to me, and I'm just always trying to figure out what they're playing, how they're playing. Nowadays with the interwebs, you just can Google and find out anything about most stuff. So it's fun to just kind of geek out, like on like if you're listening to a Jimi Hendrix record, everybody knows Mitch Mitchell was probably playing a Ludwig kit. And it was probably mic'd this particular way. And, you can see videos of him playing, and he plays pretty light. He was a big fan of Elton John. So it's just cool to see all those things, because a lot of those elements, or actually all the elements, add up to the drum sound. The way the guy hits the drums, if he's a basher or if he's not, if he plays lighter. Which, generally a lot of those sounds from the 60s and 70s, the drummers were not bashing like they do now.
Yeah, I mean, it only takes a cursory search of any, drum forum to, see the debates that go back and forth, what this drummer played on this record and how he hit the drum and all those different things. I mean, there's just a ton of debate about it. What hi-hats was Ringo using on, the White Album? And, it can drive you crazy if you're trying to, and I think a lot of guys get lost in the gear thing, and I have to have this exact cymbal so that I sound like drummer X, whoever that may be. And like you said, a lot of that tone and sound comes from the hands, quite honestly. I mean, I think you would sound like you behind any kit by any manufacturer for the most part, and
I think that's true of any drummer. And it reminds me of this amazing story that Jim Keltner told me about when he first moved to LA and was getting into doing sessions. He, back then the sessions were so big, you could kind of sneak in the room, because there would be 20 people playing on the floor or 15 people or something. And he would sneak into sessions and just sit there in the corner. And he was on a session with Earl Palmer, or on a session that Earl Palmer was playing drums on, and he got there early, and he was like, oh man, he walked over to the drum kit and kind of tapped on the drums. He wanted to hear how they tune the drums, just to learn something about how to tune the drums for recording, and he tapped on them, and he was like, man, these things do not sound good. I'm pretty sure when Earl Palmer gets in, he's gonna probably tune these things, get them sounding right. And so he sat there, and everybody came in, and Earl Palmer shows up, and he sits down at the kit, and he just kind of goes around the kit, plays the drums, lights up a cigarette, and they start playing the song. He doesn't even tune the drums, but they sounded incredible. It was just the way he hit them.
Yeah.
I don't know what he did. Keltner was like, I don't know. He just figured out how to make them sound good by hitting them a certain way or not hitting them. Maybe the rack tom was jacked up or something, and he didn't hit that. But it was in his hands.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. I mean, I heard a similar story that Steve Jordan told once. I think he was going in to do the Expensive Winos record with Keith Richards, and he said, Keith showed up with all these amps that looked like he paid $10 for them at a pawn shop someplace, and they sounded horrible, on the floor of the studio. And he was like, man, something's wrong here. He said when he walked into the control room for the first playback, it sounded exactly like Keith.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess when a guy gets his sound, it's just going to come through no matter what. It's undeniable, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, drummers, it's particularly, it's a phenomena. I think it's because it's an acoustic instrument, and there are infinite variables that the person hitting those drums is going to do. There's so many different ways of hitting the drum, and how you balance your sound between all your limbs. How does it sound in the room when you're playing the instrument? How do you hit the drum? Your sticks, your head choices. There's so many variables. That's why drummers are crazy.
Well,
they're trying to, because you think you have it figured out, and you're just, you're so ecstatic, and then the next day you go into a different room with the same drums, and you're like, shit, these things sound horrible. What happened? It's like, oh, the room.
Yeah.
You're playing an acoustic instrument. Of course, you're at the mercy of the acoustics in the room. I'm sure you've experienced it, playing in clubs or different venues. Every night, if you're on tour or something, your drums sound totally different because of the acoustics. So
yeah,
you have to accommodate that.
Yeah, you certainly do.
Yeah, it's makes you a little nuts after a while. You're like, oh man, I guess I could be playing on just about anything then.
Well, and you know, depending on the gig, you know, if it's a fly date and you've got backline, you might be playing on anything. You know, I'm sure you have some horror stories that you could share about, you know, the backline kit shows up and it looks like it just came out of a fire. You know, it's I
haven't had any bad experiences. I've had really good experiences. There was this one kit, I still think about it. I was playing because it just sounded insane. It sounded so good. I couldn't believe it was one of those kits that it was like a backline kit for the Telluride Jazz Festival, and I was playing there with a friend, and it was one of those round badge Gretsch kits, but it was like a 12, 13, 16 with a 22-inch bass drum, and it had coated ambassadors on everything, on the bass drum, front and back head, no hole, no muffling, top and bottom of the toms. Everything had coated ambassadors, and it sounded insane. It was actually one of those kits that made me play differently because of the way it sounded. You know how sometimes when you're on a kit that inspires you and you're just like, man, I can't believe this. This is making me, I'm hearing things differently now. And, you know, maybe it was the altitude, or I don't know. Telluride, you know, it's like 9,000 feet or something. So, but I've had, I called the backline company after that gig, and I was like, what was that kit? Are you guys ever going to sell that? Please sell it to me. And, of course, they knew all about it. They're like, of course we're not going to sell it. This is a magical instrument. We're never selling this thing. But, I love it when that happens.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I think anybody would. I've had some really bad experiences, you know, and some good ones as well. But you know, sometimes you're using somebody else's kit, and it's great, and other nights it's not so great. You know, and you just have to adapt and get through the gig. I mean, that's why you're there. You know.
Yeah.
So, Matt, you know, I want to go back a little bit, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask about this, because there is, you know, there's so much talk about your time with Pearl Jam, and I do want to at least touch on that. I don't want to spend a lot of time in the past, because, you know, people can go out to mattchamberlain.com and see all of your credits and everything. But I do want to share a story about Pearl Jam and the first time I was exposed to Pearl Jam. And of course, you were in the video for Alive, and that was the first exposure that I had. The first time that I saw the video for Alive was on a television program on MTV called Headbangers Ball. Okay.
Oh, I remember that.
So, you know, you're in the band at this time, right? Or I guess you had just left to go be on Saturday Night Live, I guess, by the time the video hit the airwaves. But, you know. Yeah,
that was the last of the whole summer that I was with them. That was the last gig we did, was in Seattle at this club called Rock Candy, which is now a condo. And and they videoed and recorded the entire gig, and that song was the song they used for the you know, their single, and it was actually the recording of that gig.
Right.
It wasn't the version off the record, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool. But, you know, I was a young metalhead at this time, you know, because that was the popular music of the time. You know, rock music really was about, you know, dudes with long hair and guitars and you know, Marshall amps and big drums and all that stuff. But I remember seeing that video come on Headbangers Ball because MTV had no idea what to do with Pearl Jam. Right. I mean, they just saw guys with long hair playing guitar. They must be a hard rock or metal band. Right. That must be what this is. But I saw it on Headbangers Ball, and I was like, yeah, this is different, and it's probably going to be bad for that genre, you know, for the rock music of that time, you know, the heavy metal, hard rock kind of stuff. Did you know that it was going to be completely different and change kind of the landscape of music, or were you just a young guy out there on the road with a band making a living? I'm curious what you were thinking at the time.
I had a sense that something was going on because Well, first of all, let me tell you how I ended up there doing that. When Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians, my band I was in, broke up, the producer of the last record that we did was friends with the A&R guy of Pearl Jam over at Epic, and they were looking for a drummer that summer to fill in because they had their record coming out, and it was all ramping up. And so I went out to Seattle, and we rehearsed for about 10 days. And when I was there during that time, Seattle was just on fire. There was so much music going on, and every night after we rehearsed, we'd go out and see some insanely great band like Mudhoney, or go. There were so many local bands that were just killing it, and this was before the whole grunge thing became the grunge thing. It was just what these people played. It was just like loud rock music inspired by punk rock and classic rock, like Sabbath. And so I had a sense that there was something. It felt really cool. That's all I can say, for lack of a better word. It just felt like something was going on. I don't know what, but it was like it was definitely not hair metal, and it was just it seemed like it was a bunch of friends just playing in clubs, supporting each other. And, apart from the music, there was also the whole art scene in the town. There were a lot of, artists that were a part of this music thing, because back then it was so affordable to live there. You could be an artist or a musician and pay your rent and eat food and do whatever the hell you wanted because it was so affordable. And so it just felt like something was going on. People were starting record labels like Sub Pop, and it just felt really unique. It was this whole do-it-yourself kind of attitude. And but there was definitely some people getting in, some record company people with some vision that were there. Obviously, they signed Nirvana.
Right. And,
Alice in Chains had some success already, but they were kind of like borderline hair metal at that point.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, the first time I saw Alice in Chains, they were actually opening up for like the Anthrax and Megadeth and Slayer tour, so I mean, they were out on the road with that kind of tour. So yeah, they definitely, they didn't fit the box, I guess, because of the industry. I don't know.
Yeah. And things just felt like in general, not necessarily just in Seattle, but just in general, like this is like 90, 91. It felt like music was starting to loosen up, especially with drums. Like you could actually hear drums again. Like you can actually hear ghost notes. Like, holy shit, you can actually hear the tone of a snare drum because like those metal bands, like like when Edie Brickell, like when our first record came out in '88, Guns N' Roses was the biggest thing, and that was that '80s production, where everything was drenched in reverb, and the drummers back then were just hitting everything as hard as they could.
Yeah.
There's no dynamics. There's no like inside shit going on. It was all kind of blocky, and it works for that kind of music. But around 90, 91, it felt like you're starting to hear drummers play. Like I remember buying the very first Smashing Pumpkins record when that came out, like in 90, I think it was, or 91, and I was like, holy shit, I can act. This he's like Keith Moon or something. Just. Like, this is badass. I thought this is so badass. And then there were all these other bands that just, around that same time, that put records out, and it felt like there was something going on. It's like, oh, this is a whole other kind of music where people are playing their instruments and, kicking ass and writing good songs. And, like the first thing I ever heard out of Seattle before I even went up to do the stuff with Pearl Jam was the Temple of the Dog record. And I thought it was incredible. I was man, this is like, I love this. This is great songwriting. They're jamming, kind of, like improvising. And, Matt Cameron, of course, is just killing it.
Yeah.
And Chris Cornell is obviously just, it just felt special and different. So, and it was exciting. It was just exciting to know that, I'm 22 years old and I'm not going to have to play hair metal. This is an option. I can play rock music where people are having a musical conversation, where it feels like music is being played. And so anyways, I did that. It was like a temporary thing, like a East Coast tour that we did in a van. And we were literally sharing hotel rooms, opening up for bands. Nobody knew who Pearl Jam was. And, it was really fun. And then we ended with the gig at Rock Candy. And at the time, I didn't want to continue doing it because I didn't have any connection with the music. They had written the whole record and it was coming out and they were going to tour it for 4 years. And I was like, man, you guys are amazing, but this isn't, it's not me. It's not what I do. It's, it's fun to do for a summer, but for 4 years.
Yeah. You would have been in that kind of hired gun role because, you did not you didn't record the record. So,
No, Dave Cruzen did that and he's awesome.
Yeah.
But there were some issues they were having and they needed somebody. It was like the hot seat. They needed somebody immediately because they were getting ready to just road dog it for, years and years and years. And I had just come off of road dogging it with Edie Brickell for like 3 years straight. I was like, man.
Yeah, I'm ready.
I love
to,
you guys, but if I had a connection to your music, like if I was in the studio writing with you guys and we had this band vibe going on, it'd be great. But I just didn't feel a connection.
Yeah. Well, I've read somewhere that you actually recommended Dave for the gig.
Yeah. So Dave Abraziz was a friend of mine in Dallas because I was living in Dallas at the time still. And I just saw him play around town and I thought, man, he would be great because he's like, for some reason, Texas drummers have this funk thing going on when they're playing rock. I don't know what it is, but I have so many friends from Texas that there's like a thing. It's hard to describe, but he had it, and it was like, it was rock, but it was funky, you know what I mean? So,
yeah.
And he had a killer pocket, and he was obviously, he's my favorite drummer that ever played with that band, that's for sure. God, he's such a badass.
Well, you should get on some of the drum forums and say that and watch the fight break out. It goes.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, man. It goes all the time. Who was the best drummer in Pearl Jam?
God. Well, they've had as many drummers as Spinal Tap at this point. So
well, that's true. And man, they've got a pretty good guy manning the throne for them these days. Like you said, Matt Cameron, you can't hardly go wrong with him. And I know you spent some time touring with Soundgarden because he was out, I think, with Pearl Jam at the time, right?
It's a very incestuous little circle. It's very confusing. Yeah. It was perfect because they didn't have to call the drummer a different name. They just looked back and said, "Hey, Matt."
You're right. How many times
Same
have you?
initials and everything. MC.
Yeah.
And plus,
how many?
We're always being mistaken for each other, so perfect.
I was just going to ask. How many times has somebody come up and said, "Oh, Matt Cameron, man, can I have your autograph?" How many times have you signed Matt Cameron on somebody's ticket stub?
Hey, I don't mind. That guy is such a badass. It's incredible.
You're both incredible guys. I mean,
I don't mind being mistaken for him. I'll take it any day. But it's just funny at this point. It's like a Monty Python skit at trying to explain to somebody like, well, we both played in Pearl Jam and in Soundgarden, but I'm not the original Soundgarden drummer. He's the original Soundgarden drummer, but I'm not really the original. Never mind.
Oh man, to come to a dinner party with both of you guys would probably be just a riot. I'm guessing. I don't know, but
well, we've often joked about how it is people do mistaken us, and on top of that, they also mistaken me for Jimmy Chamberlain because our last names are the same. So we were talking about we should all start a band where all three of us are in the band because Matt plays killer guitar and I can play some bass. We'll get Jimmy to play some drums. Thoroughly confuse everyone.
If you do put that band together, please, I'll have all three of you guys on this show at once. Okay, we will announce it right here on the Drum Shuffle. It'll be fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh.
But it's the thing about that gig though, it's so funny because I literally only spent 2 weeks playing with them, and it was just that one gig, and it wasn't like I put a lot of time into it.
Yeah, well,
it's just funny to be identified. I mean, obviously the song did very well for them, and
right,
kind of broke them into superstardom.
Yeah, for sure.
And they've been there ever since. They're killing it still, man. They're like they're kind of like the Grateful Dead of the '90s. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
They don't even have to put a record out. They can just go out and tour and sell out 20,000 seat places forever.
Yeah, well,
great.
I think probably one of the biggest rock bands in the world today. I mean, you've got the Foo Fighters, you've got U2 that's still out doing it, but I mean, they're huge. I mean, they're iconic, really.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah, it's incredible. And it's funny because I was just sitting around talking with a friend the other day about all this unfortunate shit that's been going down with, people from my generation that, that are in band or that were in iconic bands, like dying and moving on and just all this horrible shit that's going on or has gone on. And we were just thinking about like what bands are left from my generation that I would go see when I'm 70, there's still Pearl Jam. Where all the original members are still alive. Maybe some British bands like Radiohead or I don't know. I mean, it's definitely not a lot of the Seattle bands
right
are around. But I was like, man.
Well, I mean, if you're looking at a band from 25, 30 years ago, there's just very few of them left that have all the original members, period. And, now there are bands that are touring out there that have zero original members left. I mean, right. And I'm not trying to cut on those guys at all. You got to make a living, but, the promoters are just buying, the name. They don't care that it's, just like the conga player that's the original member or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but, I mean, there's two versions of some of those bands that are out touring, competing against one another. I mean, it's kind of crazy that the business is what it is, Well,
I guess it kind of makes sense. I mean, if you want to make a living, you're definitely not getting it from record sales anymore. You got to hit the road, and however you can figure it out, get out there and work.
Yeah, that's
not easy.
No, it's not. I mean, in the industry, it seems like now is kind of set up against the artist as much as it ever has been. Maybe you could compare it to the 50s, when all the payola stuff was going on. But I mean, when I do a recording and it hits, iTunes or Spotify or wherever it goes, if somebody goes out and buys, my band's song on iTunes for $1.29 or whatever they're going for these days, I mean, we get like 12 cents. I mean, it's crazy.
Right.
So
well, and apparently, from what I understand, record labels are making more money now than they have in the past, 15 years, because they've cut all these deals with these streaming services, and they actually are making money again. But it's not being, it's not going into artist development or the music. It's going into somebody's bank account.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because it's odd. It's odd because it's not trickling down.
No.
And I guess it makes sense that they're a business. Music industry. They're trying to make money. So if people aren't buying records, if they're streaming, they're going to go for some other investment, which is kind of ridiculous to think that these people call themselves a record company and that they're trying to put music out, but really they don't really give a shit about music anymore, I don't think.
No.
If it's not making them money, what's the point in being a business?
Right.
That's just the reality of it, I think. And so you got to hit the road or sell some T-shirts or something.
That's right.
Or get on social media, man, and start doing, selling. I don't know. That's something I haven't wrapped my head around yet. But I know there's a lot of drummers and different musicians that are on Instagram, and they have this whole web-based business thing going on.
Well, I mean, it's just however you can, pay the rent at the end of the month. At the end of the day, you've got to make money, and I think it leads people to be innovators, and try to figure out how to capture revenue from non-traditional streams, and
yeah.
I mean, everybody's in that situation, I think. 20 years ago, I was in a band here in Kentucky, and we were getting some, major label attention, and that was great. But I remember, an older friend who had kind of been down that road said to me, he said, "You think when you sign your record deal, all your problems will go away? Let me tell you something, son. That's when your problems will start."
Yeah, it's
because
true.
You owe somebody else money at that point, Yeah.
I mean, it's essentially a bad bank loan.
Yeah, it is.
It would be easier if you just got a bank loan. Then you just pay the bank back. But when you get a record deal, they're giving you money, but they're taking a lot more than just your, the money you owe them. I mean, it gets deep, especially nowadays. They go in for a percentage of your merchandise, and I mean, it gets kind of weird.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. They just get some, get your Instagram, Facebook, social media rocking, and have direct contact with people that care about your music, and everything else is just silly. It's like old school, the record company or the record business it's just ancient, I think, at this point. It's amazing it's still around, but it's the streaming services that are keeping it going. Yeah. And I'm not a record company business scholar, so I don't keep up with everything that's going on. I just I hear stories.
Yeah.
And for most of my work, I am employed by record companies, because they're the ones funding recordings for the most part. A lot of times people are getting they are getting creative with funding their records. There's been obviously tons of crowd sourced funding and other ways of doing it, investors. But it's just a miracle. People are still making recordings. I love it. I hope it doesn't go away.
Yeah, you and me both. I mean, and I'm still a guy that, I don't feel like I have music unless I get it in some sort of physical form. I mean, I'm still a CD guy and, vinyl and stuff like that. I feel like I don't own it until I have it in some sort of physical format. That's just, I guess I'm old school that way. Matt,
I love records. I mean,
I
just love records. So, that's what I grew up on. That's that's what I do all day long. I make records. I love it.
Yeah, well, people need to buy them so that you stay employed, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, I'm just trying to be as crafty as possible and kind of navigate my way through all these changes with the music industry, because, you know, having my own studio space has been really great, because I don't, you know, if I was just a drummer waiting to go and do sessions, I don't think I would necessarily be doing them all the time. I think a lot of times people will come to my studio because it's, you know, I can record and play at the same, you know, it's like everything comes together. It's like,
right.
And plus I have all my tools here, you know, all my drums, and I can be creative, and, you know, I kind of set it up so that I could do everything I've always done, but I'm not relying on somebody to have a budget to go to a recording studio. I can just do it here.
Right. Well, and I mean, we live in the day of everybody has a recording studio, you know, I mean, and there's some incredible stuff that comes out of bedrooms. You know, I mean, if you look for it, you can find incredible things that have come out of small project studios. It's not hard to do.
Yeah, of course. I mean, God, you can just buy, I mean, you just need a laptop, a little interface, and couple microphones, and you're in business, man. I mean,
yeah,
you just gotta, you know, it's like people that make movies on iPhones or on, you know, you just gotta have a good story. You just gotta have something to say, you know, something, some kind of vision, and it doesn't matter what the format is, really. You just get it out there, and if people react to it, then great.
Absolutely. Well, and, you know, I mean, I think we're lucky as drummers in that, you know, a guy that's a great, you know, singer-songwriter type. I'm going to give a, you know, kind of a hypothetical scenario, but, you know, I'm a singer-songwriter type of fella or lady, and, you know, I'm a good guitarist. I can play bass. I can do vocals, but I don't have, you know, a 16 input interface to do a drum set. That's where a guy like Matt Chamberlain comes in. Right. I mean, you can do drum tracks for somebody and just send them the WAV files. Right. I mean, drummers can market themselves in that way.
Yeah, I do it all the time. I'm doing something for this artist in the UK. In a couple of days, they're sending me the Pro Tool session, so I'll, you know, record the drums and talk to them on Skype and make sure I'm going in the right direction. You know, just like if we were in the room together. And I'll just playlist like 5 or 6 takes to give them some options, upload it to them, and there you go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a great business model, you know, for you, because you got a great studio. Matt, I want to switch gears just a little bit here, because there's a couple other things that I want to get to in our allotted time. You spent a season in the Saturday Night Live band. And of course, I think at that time it was, you know, the great G.E. Smith was the band leader over there. But the last time we spoke, you were telling me that, you know, in your one season that you were on Saturday Night Live, some of the cast members would actually book time at SIR, I think, in New York, and have you come over and jam with them. Give me a good story, because I know you've got one.
Well, Adam Sandler, he was one of the cast members, and he was, or is, a guitar player, and at the time was writing songs and just wanted to jam, and he was like, hey, if I book a couple hours at SIR on our break, because, you know, like on Saturdays we'd rehearse for a couple hours and then take like 4 hours off and then do the show.
Right.
And he's like, hey, would you be into going to SIR and just jamming for an hour or two? And yeah, so we went over there and jammed on some stuff. And he was into you know, grunge music at the time, so wanted to play like, you know, Nirvana songs, and it was really fun. It was fun. It's cool to hang out with that dude. He was so funny and nice. And the other cast member, Dana Carvey, he's a drummer. And and like every show, whenever there was, you know, the band of the week would be there rehearsing, we'd be standing there watching them rehearse, and he'd always go, "What do you think of that drummer, man? Is he any good?" I'm like, "Yeah, generally they're pretty good, yeah."
And you were on the season that he and Mike Myers basically launched Wayne's World, right?
Yeah. We recorded that song, the Wayne's World party time. It was Dana Carvey and I in the studio. It was 2 drum kits set up. So I don't know if it ever got released, but there's a version where we play the song and then at the end we trade 4s. And it just keeps going on. Like we just, just solo, and it's hilarious. I did not know that you were the Wayne's World drummer. That's fantastic. Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Now, okay, so now I have a 13-year-old daughter, and a few years ago, I couldn't take 2 steps in this house without hearing the song "Let It Go" from the movie Frozen. And when I told Skylar, my daughter, that I was going to be talking with you, she was like, "Oh, cool." I was like, "He recorded Let It Go." And she was like, "Oh my God, really?" So you put drums to quite possibly the biggest earworm of the last 10 years. Yeah. I always apologize to all my friends that have kids. I'm just like, man, I know you're probably listening to that shit over and over again. I'm not personally responsible, but if you're hearing drums back there, I apologize.
Well, it's just fantastic that you're so versatile. I mean, and you do so many different sessions. Like for example, I looked at, your show dates, and I know you're doing, I think here in just a little bit, you're doing a show out there in California with Randy Newman, and presumably that's going to be a fairly big production, and looking at your stuff that you have, coming out in this year in 2018, Perry Farrell, Rufus Wainwright, A Perfect Circle, one of my personal favorites, Neko Case. I mean,
The Perfect Circle and the Neko Case are already out.
Oh, are they out? Okay, cool. Well, yeah, I've heard the Neko song, on satellite radio. I've actually caught that. But so when you go into these sessions, how do you get into the different genre? How do you get in that groove? I mean, is it something that you have to mentally prepare for, or do you just go in and play for the song?
No, you just show up and just play music. It's pretty simple. You just listen and play your instrument. That's the easy part.
Well, here I was thinking you were going to say, well, I always stop by the Buddhist temple on my way and, pray to the country gods.
No. Like with Neko flew me out to Tucson. She likes to record at the studio out there called Wave Lab. And I think she's done a bunch of records there. And it's just one big room. There's like no separation from the control room to the performers. It's just one big room. So it was like being in a big rehearsal space. We just played and they recorded everything, and we ate Mexican food, and I had some nice IPAs, and
killer.
We did that for like 4 days, and it was really fun. It was hot as hell because Tucson is a very hot place.
Yes.
But and then like the Perfect Circle stuff was here in Los Angeles, and that's a little more tweaky because that guy Billy Howardell, the guitar player,
mm-hmm.
he writes everything in Logic, and he's a big computer geek kind of guy. He likes to get in there and edit and do all kinds of computery choppy stuff.
Yeah.
And so those sessions were like learn the song and then just go off, like just try shit, once we got like a take they liked, they would just say, just go nuts and just try a bunch of shit, because we're probably going to take, if anything seems kind of usable, we might chop it up and put it here or loop it, or there were a couple songs that were just instrumental, they didn't have vocals, and so I just tried a bunch of different grooves over them, and it was pretty wide open. There was no it wasn't too you have to get the performance of the song. It was a little more of like, let's just experiment.
Right.
Because they can go in later and chop things up, and they did.
Right.
So,
well, and like your live gig that you have coming up here in just a couple of weeks with Randy, I think you guys are at the Hollywood Bowl. Presumably that's going to be, I don't know, but I'm assuming you're probably going to be going from charts or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's it's Randy's career retrospective. It's like it's going to be a little bit of the music from his entire life that he's, like different songs from different records, and it's going to be with a full orchestra. So
a huge amount of material to conquer.
Well, I don't, there's a lot of stuff that's just the orchestra and him, and then I think the band, because there's going to be the orchestra, then there's going to be the band. It's going to be guitar, bass, drums, keyboard, and then Randy is playing piano and singing. The band stuff, I think there's maybe 15 songs, but they're all songs that
Right.
I mean, at least I know them. It's like Short People and and there were a lot of songs I didn't realize he wrote. Like he wrote, that song "Mama Told Me Not to Come."
Yeah, sure, of course.
That Three Dog Night had a huge hit with in the 70s.
Yeah.
His version is totally different, and we're doing that one, and it's amazing. It's Jim Keltner playing on it. Or I think it's Jim on that one. The one Keltner one that is mind blowing, that's just so amazing, is Randy also wrote "You Can Leave Your Hat On."
Oh wow!
I think Joe Cocker had a hit with it.
Yeah.
But Randy's version of it with Keltner on drums is so amazing. Check it out. It's just
I'll have to do
slanky and weird, and he hits like it sounds like a giant China cymbal. He hits it like at the beginnings of the choruses, and it's just so bizarre sounding and cool. But it's a whole different take on that song, because everybody's heard the Joe Cocker version,
right?
Which is super 80s.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun to get into these tracks and check out all the Keltner stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jim was kind of known for that. I mean, Jim Keltner is one of those guys you can't teach somebody how to play that way, in my opinion.
He's just all feel and vibe and randomness almost. Because he's a jazz drummer basically. He likes to improvise.
Yeah.
And so every take you do with him is a little different.
Yep.
And when you get the magical one, it's just like, wow, I never would have thought of doing that.
Yeah. Well, another guy that, I've played in a lot of bands that wanted to do material from the band, and Levon Helm is one of the hardest guys to try to comp the exact same feel, because it's just, he was a singing drummer, and grew up in Arkansas or whatever, playing the honky tonks down there when he was a kid. It's just impossible to replicate the exact feel of him,
It's incredible. There's like mysteries of the universe, and that he's one of them. Keltner.
Yeah.
A guy like Charlie Watts.
Yeah.
John Bonham. How do you, what happened?
I know. Yeah.
How come those guys, how come it's just impossible to cop those dudes? And, maybe it's because they grew up in a time when people allowed them to have their own feel and their own sound. And, that's one thing I think about a lot is, nowadays everybody's so homogenized, and they're not allowed to just kind of develop their own feel. They're immediately told you got to play with a click track, and you got to do this and do that. It's like, well, back then people were like, they weren't thinking about that. They were just thinking about making music. They weren't thinking about playing to a click track, or if it sounded good, it sounded good, and it did. That stuff. Thank God.
Yeah.
The band,
well,
it's just magical.
We talk on this show a lot about, if you're going to try to be a session guy, you just have to know how to play with a click. I mean, that's just all there is to it, because, you know, I mean, everything's snapped to the grid these days. And, you know, I listen back to recordings that I've done where I wasn't playing with a click. You know, it was my own band, and the tempo fluctuates from verse to chorus to, you know, the middle eight or whatever. And sometimes it's just so much cooler to not have that, you know, metronome dictating that you have to stay just perfectly aligned to the grid. And, you know, you were talking about people with their own feel and doing, you know, kind of weird stuff. You know, I'm going to tell everybody right now, if you haven't heard of Critters Buggin', our guest today was in, you know, had a band together called Critters Buggin', and it's some pretty awesome stuff. So I'm going to tell everybody to go check out a Critters Buggin' record, but, you know, don't pass go, do not collect $200. Go find that someplace. You're welcome. I mean, it's just great stuff. And, you know, I mean, I'm going to assume, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but, you know, tell us all, you know, I'm assuming that was you just being able to be Matt, right?
Yeah. Well, that band was, the whole idea with that band was to go into a studio and just improvise. Or we actually did a record just live where we just booked 3 nights at a club in Seattle and just recorded the 3 nights and improvised the whole time. And the whole idea was we loved the concept of those early 70s Miles records, Miles Davis stuff, where Tio Macero would take the improvs and chop them up and make more concise versions of them, or make them more arranged, you know?
Yeah.
And so that was the idea with that band, is to not really write anything and to just make these records where we make the record by editing the arrangement together and then overdubbing to that to make it sound more intentional. That was kind of the idea with that band. And we did write some stuff later on. We thought, okay, this is a lot of work editing. Maybe we should just write, you know, each of us come in with 2 songs, we'll record them, and then it'll be another way of making a record. But yeah, that band was fully experimental, improvisational. With Skerrick, you know, that sax player Skerrick,
mm-hmm.
and Mike Dillon, the percussionist. Those 2 guys played with like Les Claypool's Frog Brigade, and Mike and Skerrick. I mean, they're always on the road. They play with Galactic all the time, with Stanton Moore, the part of that world. And Skerrick has his own bands that he does. He has a band called Garage à Trois with Stanton Moore and Charlie Hunter.
It's a great band name.
Yeah, it's a great band. You should check their records out, Garage à Trois.
I will. I haven't heard of them. So you've turned me on to something new today. And so that's fantastic.
Yeah. If you like Stanton, man, he's killing it on those records. He always kills it.
Yeah. That's another, you know, like you said, another special brand of goodness.
Yeah.
Matt, I want to be respectful of your time. We've gone just at an hour, and you know, I don't want to take up too much of your day, but one of the traditions that we have here on the Drum Shuffle is we always ask our guests for a good piece of advice for other drummers, other musicians, and it can be anything you want it to be, but you've just had such a legendary career, both, you know, live and touring with all these different bands. You know, your discography speaks for itself. Give us a good piece of advice that we can take out there as we're conquering the drumming and music world.
Oh man. Well, I think this is like a multi answer, because it's all connected. I think, you know, a lot of, in my experience being a musician, I've noticed that, you know, when you try to, you know, get out of your, like you get out of your body, or you get out of your heart and try to play what you think other people want from you instead of just playing what you feel. I think that's a big mistake a lot of people make, is trying to second guess what other people want instead of just playing what you're feeling. And I know that's a very vague answer, but I think a lot of drummers would benefit, and a lot of musicians would benefit by just kind of listening more, taking it in, feeling it, and not being afraid to just give your point of view on it instead of, a lot of guys just get scared. They're like, man, I hope, like they're not thinking about the music. They're thinking about, I hope they like my drumming, or I hope I don't screw up, or
yeah. Especially if you're me. If you're me, you're in the studio going, God, please don't let me bomb this take.
Yeah, just and it's not easy to do, but take a couple deep breaths, center yourself and listen, and just get out of your head about it all, and just react to it. If you've practiced and you've put in the hours and you've played enough, you're going to play some music. You just got to get out of the way of yourself and do it. It's what happens when you're listening, and I think a lot of drummers don't listen. They just, they have a bunch of preconceived ideas about how they're supposed to be, and the way you're supposed to be is just be yourself. It's the most powerful thing you can do as a musician. So that would be the advice I would say would be the most valuable if I was to go back in time and tell my 20-year-old self. I would say, just trust your gut, basically, and your heart. Just play from. If you play from those places, you're gonna make some music, and everything else is just a waste of energy.
Yeah.
So, but that's easier said than done. So, it's something I work on all the time. Try to just listen, and the music will tell you what it wants, if you're listening.
Yeah, so. That's great advice, Matt, and we certainly appreciate it. And you're right, there must be something in the water in Texas, because Aaron Comas from Spin Doctors was our guest, a couple of months back, and he said something very similar when we asked him for his piece of advice. He was like, they hired you to be you, go in and be you. Don't worry about the rest of the stuff. So, you Texans.
That's funny. Aaron Comas, man. I used to live down the street from him in Texas. I used to see him all the time. Yeah, I used to go over to his little house over there. He was part of the same little music scene with Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians. We're all playing in the same clubs, and he literally lived around the corner from me. I used to walk over to his place, and we used to jam. And
that's so awesome. It's just such a small world. And, the cool thing about us drummers is we're all rooting for one another. You know what I'm saying? And, and I don't mind to share this, and I hope you don't mind, but, when I reached out to you to say, hey, man, I'd love to have you on the show, it was like almost instantly, it was like, hey, here's my number, call me. It's just like I feel like drummers are a different type of musician because we are all rooting for one another, and we're always willing to help out, not taking anything away from saxophone players or guitarists, but drummers are kind of a special, fraternity for sure.
Yeah, we're the guys always packing the shit up at the end of the night while the singer and the guitar player are out, trying to pick up chicks. We're
truer words have never been spoken. Send complaints to matt@mattchamberlain.com. No, I'm kidding. Matt, thank you so much for taking some time today to come on the show. We really appreciate it. It goes without saying, man, you're welcome here anytime. Keep us posted on, everything that you got going on, and we'll have you back sometime real soon.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Absolutely. Matt, thanks so much. We'll talk to you real soon.
Okay.
All right.
I'll see you later.
All right. See you, buddy.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
All right, guys and girls, that's going to do it for episode 28 of the Drum Shuffle. Many, many thanks to Matt Chamberlain for taking time out of his very busy schedule to come on and talk with us today. We really appreciate that. As always, I'm going to ask you, hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're using to listen in today. It helps us tremendously to continue to grow. It also helps a lot if you send a link to a friend who might enjoy the show. It only takes a couple of minutes, and it helps more than I can say. We really appreciate everybody tuning in. You're not going to want to miss us next week. We are going to be talking with the great Jerry Gaskell from the band King's X. Again, another huge influence on me personally, and a huge influence on countless other drummers out there. So please tune in next week. You're not going to want to miss that. We love hearing from all of you guys throughout the week. Our email address is thedrumshufflepodcast@gmail.com. Our web address is thedrumshuffle.com. And of course, you can find more information on me over at jamieeads.com. Again, we appreciate you listening. Can't wait to talk to you again next week. So until next time, may your head stay strong and your sticks never break. Cheers.